Testing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There we go. Oh, it's morning there? Okay. Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Not sure why I can't hear myself. Testing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. All right. So I'm going to go through this. There's some of this that we see here. You've got mail. So Dan Hennon reached out, thank you, to Kenneth Maines, and this is one of the first things that was said. Okay, and this is dated 2/10/2019. He can investigate any case, but he cannot do it pro bono. $5,000 to $15,000 depending on the case. Interesting stuff. He says, Dan, I looked over the case briefly on your YouTube page. It's a YouTube group, but okay. The cost to investigate and render an expert opinion on this case would be $7,000. So after he looks at the YouTube quote-unquote page, which he may be talking about the group, he may be talking about the Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook group, or he may have looked at the Justice for David Crowley of Facebook, Justice for David Crowley of Gray State Facebook page. Most likely it was the group. 2019, yeah, it could have been either or. I think Dan Hennon was running the group and the page by that point, so I'm not sure exactly which one Kenneth Maines is referring to. Some people say page when they really mean group. Cost to investigate $7,000. This will be done by sifting through the documentation you have and what I can gather from my office in Pennsylvania. I will make phone calls, email individuals, etc., in order to form an opinion on the deaths for $7,000. From his office, he will make phone calls. He will email people, etc., in order to form an opinion on the deaths. So who did he make phone calls to? Which individuals did he email? And etc. that led him to form his opinion on the deaths. That should be laid out in his final report. This is the main event, the Kenneth Maines event. What do we have? Hey, Deb. Hey, Rick. Get a few of these things here. Blah, blah, blah. So we got that. Okay. 15K. WTF, says Crip Rick. Wow. It's a lot of money, Pete. Deb says, I don't think he did much, if that. Yeah. And the cap, right, Rick? Isn't that something, Rick, where he says 15K? Like, that's the cap. That's like 5 to 15K. Wow. For what? Now, when he's talking about those things that we just talked about, let's go back to that. I will make phone calls, email individuals. Did he do that? And who did he contact? I think that's interesting. It says if you want me to travel to Minnesota to do interviews, meet people, or visit crime scenes, etc., it will be $12,000. This is going to be a very powerful sentence here when you get to the end, when Dan Hannon says, if we wanted to hire you to turn over every stone, how much would that be? Well, he doesn't have time for that. Right? Can't put a price on that. But remember, in February 2019, this is what we're talking about. This is good stuff. Sorry, I'm just reading some of this. I'm for the very first time. I think all of this so far for the very first time. It's nothing that Dan Hannon probably hasn't said on one of the shows that we did back in 2019 after this report came out. But I think that would have had to have been after May, so probably around June of 2019. We probably did a show or a couple shows on Kenneth Maines, or at least talking about, what Kenneth Maines' report said. He said the choice is up to you. So, actually, Rick, I guess it would be 12,000 that he could have been hired for, right? Can you imagine him going out there to interview people and who he would interview for another $5,000? Do interviews, meet with people, revisit crime scene, etc. So, if it's not for $12,000, you're not going to revisit the crime. You want to revisit the crime scene. Dan Hannon had already revisited the crime scene, right? At this point in 2019, considering everything we know about the house, everything that has happened with the house after 2015, the changes, the renovations, the new owners, etc., by 2019, I'm pretty sure the crime scene that you would be able to revisit, etc., for $12,000, it would probably have changed when you already had your client, Dan Hannon, that had hired you, who had been to the crime scene, who had been to this house. That's pretty interesting too. But to do interviews with who? To meet people? To meet what the hell what do you need to meet people? Meet with the investigators, meet with the police, meet with neighbors. Maybe that's what he's talking about. Meet with neighbors, people in the area, etc., etc. People that were close to David Crowley, people that the last people to have communication with David Crowley, his wife, and his daughter. You would want to meet with those people at Ranya's school. You would want to meet with the last people that associated with Kamel when she was working, or the last people that associated with her in general. Now, at this point in 2019, I don't believe Kenneth Maines would have had access to the financial records, to the phone records that would show exactly, some of those things that someone who is an investigator, a consultative investigator, is looking into this stuff. No, Rick, I haven't. Just go to let's go to that. Have you ever spoke with or interviewed this guy? No. I mean, I would love to. I would love to have a conversation with him, and that's pretty much on me to actually reach out to this person. But no, I've never tried to interview him. I've never tried to really contact him. I left a couple messages years ago on a YouTube video that I don't know if he created or if it was just focused on him, and there just really was nothing there. So I'm just thinking about what that video was. It was years ago. It wasn't anything like these 20 minutes that I've seen so far, but I think it was about a completely separate case. And I left a comment like, what about the David Crowley case, et cetera, because some of the things that he was saying just, really was a contradiction to some of his views, to some of his things that he did in the David Crowley case. But whatever that was way back when, he didn't say anything back. But if I had a real way to contact him in a respectful way, whether it was by email or by mail, physical mail, or by phone, yeah, I would definitely love to do that. So thank you for that, Rick, because that is a good reminder. At some point, got to do that. But that's if he's open to it, right? Because there are a lot of things that he said in those first 20 minutes that I would love to clarify and kind of go over and dig a little bit deeper into. So we'll see. We will see what happened with that. And before we move on here, Deb also says, so I only watched part of y'all's video the other day with Catherine Sofel, Rick, and yourself. Did Dan hire him back? Yes, Dan hired him back in, I think, early 2019, maybe like January or February of 2019. And Kenneth Main sent Dan Hinnon the final report that was dated May of 2019. So everybody can read that. They can look at that and see this was a private investigator, what we thought was a private investigator, being hired to look into this case. And we got the report and we got, everything here about Kenneth Mains, and that's it. Yes, and I would say he's not just now coming to his opinion. I think, he's pretty much like Kenneth Mains feels like he was hired to give his opinion, which is true in some respect. But in some respect, looking at some of this stuff, I'm like, this is kind of weird. I don't know if I can make any of this bigger. The text is kind of small. Yeah, I can't make that too big. I'm messing everything up here. So, but we do have this. I'm going to put this on my website, thegraystage.com. This is in the Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook group right now. So if you do want to go and just download that, it's like 26 pages. And it goes to the back and forth between Dan Hinnon and Kenneth Mains. I'd like to get some more info on the timestamps on some of these dates to make sure that these are, just because it kind of seems like, let's see, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so just want to verify these dates because to make sure that we have an accurate timeline and that we can kind of go and look through these things. But this is good where it kind of says, Kenneth Mains looked over the case briefly on your YouTube page, right? I mean, I don't know. So, pay by check or credit card. If you cannot afford it, try to work out a payment or retainer. I do not charge hourly. That's nice. Once payment is received, I will send you a short contract for both our signature and explaining the terms. These are flat fees. They are for life, meaning I am always available to you, even after I render an opinion. The opinion will be given to you in a report that is thorough and encompassing for you to do what you want with. Most take it to law enforcement or the media, but that's up to you. Hope to work with you soon. Kenneth Maines. All right, so that was February 13th, 2019. Okay, and so they agree to it. And this is all kind of like the way that the emails read are kind of like backwards in some cases. So, and you're raised to believe this will work. Yeah, so now we're going back. Okay, so it's starting to make a little more sense about some of these, like the email chain, starting to make a little more sense. He's in Pennsylvania. Okay. Blah. So the last payment is made in May of 2019. And the report is given after that. Yeah, no need to travel at this time. I would like to keep this option available as it is a complicated case. Meeting face to face with people would be beneficial. Can you add this to the contract as a potential quote unquote add on? Yep. So they have an agreement by February 19th. Sorry, this is funny. Send it to the Hot Greg fan club. Okay, so you have the document. Please sign and send back. Okay, so that's the one where Kenneth Maines wants Dan Hinnon to sign the contract. Let's see. He says, "Hi, Kenneth. I'll be gathering all the information today from my laptop, placing it onto a CD or a thumb drive to mail to you. Which do you prefer?" And he says, "Thumb drive, please." That's what Kenneth Maines responds. Okay. Okay, so on February 23rd, 2019, Dan says, "Kenneth, today I mailed you a thumb drive consisting of documents related to the Crowley case, including our reports and photos of the Apple Valley Police Department detectives, Minnesota State BCA reports, and the Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office." That's exactly what I want. That's page 5. All right, perfect. Right there. Kenneth Maines has all of this. That's interesting. That kind of so Dan Hinnon sent him a thumb drive for the Apple Valley Police Department detectives, their reports, the Minnesota State BCA reports, which I believe are the most. I mean, the Minnesota BCA reports show David Crowley is innocent. The Apple Valley Police reports, show there's no evidence David Crowley did it. But the Minnesota State BC reports take it one step further and show, wait a minute, the DNA doesn't prove David did it. The latent print reports don't prove David did it. On and on. The firearms report, the other report, all that, none of that shows David Crowley did any of these things that he is being accused of. And here we have Dan Hennon saying he gave Kenneth Maines all of this on February 23rd, 2019. All right, so Kenneth Maines then says, fantastic, thanks. It will take me a while to sift through all the documents, but once I do, I will let you know, and I will keep you updated on where I am at the investigation. So, February to May. February, March, April, May. 4 months. And we got the final thing from Kenneth Maines. All right, let's go to the next one here. Now we're going to read these kind of from south to north just because I want to read them in the proper order. So this, okay, blah, blah. There is a lot. Dan Hennon says there's a lot. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions or comments. Okay, so on February 27th, Kenneth Maines says, I received your package today. Thank you. Please give me some time to digest. I'll be in touch. Don't hesitate to reach out, blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So by March 10th, Kenneth Maines, he started reading. I will watch stuff in a few weeks, but he started reading it. Very encompassing, and there's a lot to look at. Yeah, there is a lot to look at. What did Ken not get cause it had yet to be available? I would say probably the electronics reports, the phone records. Those are the two things that kind of stand out. Of course, I can go back. I think we had those by 2019. And I know Dan would have given them to him. So we got to see if Dan gave Kenneth Maines the phone records and the financial reports. I mean, those would be some of the two biggest things, I would think. Great question, though. Keep them coming because it helps me jog my memory with just so much of this stuff. But those are the two. By 2019, I feel like we should have had those. Yeah. I feel like 2018 we had that. I don't know. So we'll have to see. Maybe Dan still has a copy of the hard drive that he gave to Kenneth Maines. I'm sure Kenneth Maines has it. So, So I started reading. I will watch stuff next few weeks. Encompassing. That was on the 10th. Dan said I mailed the case. So on March 10th, 2019, 3:08 p.m., Dan Hennon wrote, it's a good video here, 12 minutes. And I think this was one of my videos. This is what we were talking about earlier, but Kenneth Maines said he did not play the video because because of the title alone had staged. Now, if he's talking about one of my videos, there's nothing, I don't believe I have any videos that say quote unquote staged. They're staged, like the gray stage. But I have to go back and see that. But the fact that he wouldn't even watch a video that he was hired to watch, a 12-minute video, Kenneth Maines refused to watch a 12-minute video that his client wanted him to watch. And he said, I did not play it because the title alone had staged in it. That is a bias. This is what he's saying. This is what Kenneth Mason is saying. He didn't watch it because of the title had a bias in it, not recognizing that it is a bias for him to not watch a video because it had a title that he was biased to, right? He says, when I review the case, I do not want to look at anything that could be biased on one way or the other. Well, then you would not look at Eric Nelson's film. There'd be a lot of things you would not look at because of the bias. So I get it. I mean, just look at the documents. But if you're going to say that you look at all of these documents that Dan Hannon gave you that include the DNA reports, all of that stuff, you're saying that okay. Anyways, it's a little too far. Let's go back here. Some thumbnails, please. Okay. I just want to know what video he's talking about when he says, I did not play it because of the title. I mean, is that what a private investigator does? Is that what a consultant does? If a consultant has a bias, then they would not watch this video that they already have a bias towards, right? This is on page 7. I mean, page 7, we were talking about this. And this is one of the more stranger things here. Where he's talking about bias, where he claims he doesn't have a bias, but he does. Rick says, what did Ken not get because he had yet to be available? And he says the Day One Journal. Yeah, the Day One Journal too. But I mean, would you rather have the phone records? Would you rather have the financial records, or would you rather have the Day One Journal, right? Obviously, we want all of those things, but it doesn't sound like if he didn't look at a lot of the documents that he was given. The Day One Journal, he may look at that and say, this is like 100 pages or something like that. Like he's, I'm not going to go through this, and that's kind of how I felt about the 94 pages and how I felt about the documents that he was given with the BCA, the medical examiners. Like, I'm not going to read this. Now, he never said that. I don't know if that's what he really thought, but like, it just seems like, well, if you had read that, you should have some valid questions or some reasons why, this is what the report says, so this is why the medical examiners got it right. Well, this is what the BCA lab report says, so this is why David Crowley is guilty. Or you would say, you know what? Yeah, there's some strange things here. I can't answer it. I don't know. And I'm just a consultant. But when you look at the things where he says, I'm just a consultant. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer. But look at the things where he claims that he does have an answer to. And that's where you can see some very interesting differences, I would say. But to not play it because it had the title Staged, that is a bias, even though he would talk about the people with the government conspiracies as if he understood who those people were, as if he looked into those videos where people were talking about government conspiracies. But he wouldn't watch a 12-minute video that had the word staged in it. I don't know. That's kind of interesting. But he says, when I receive a case and not looking at anything that could be biased one way or the other. Okay. I mean, that to me does not jive with the investigation, with some of the comments that he makes here, some of the comments that he makes in his final report, and some of the comments that he has recently made in this video that he's put out. So I will look at everything like this after I look at all the police information first. Okay, so at least he's saying, he won't look at it now, but he'll look at it later on, right? So I want to hear when he does eventually look at this. And that may not be relevant to this conversation that he's having with his client who's paid him, but maybe he'll recognize that may be relevant if we're ever able to communicate with him at a later time, which I hope that we are. Let's see. Hey, Bazing. In Maine's quest for not being biased, right? It's crazy. Deb says, this is infuriating. I understand not wanting to be biased, but all the info is there, reports, etc. I think you've all been quite unbiased. You've all broken down the evidence. These aren't opinions. Yeah, I mean, you can have an opinion on the evidence. You can have an opinion on the facts, but that doesn't change what is facts, right? So you can say, well, I don't like what the reports say. I don't like what the DNA evidence says, but this is what it says. And it's never about those documents. It's always about, well, you guys didn't like what Kenneth Maines said. No, we didn't like that Kenneth Maines didn't look at what the documents said. That's what we didn't like. Kenneth Maines can believe whatever he wants, can come to any conclusion. He was hired for that. He was paid for that. He was never told, hey, you have to come to a certain conclusion. For him to say that on his latest video about a client who hired him to have his own opinion, I mean, dude, to me, that just does not make sense. Why you would say something like that about your client. When your client hasn't called you out, you're calling your client out. You're calling out my friend, Dan Hinn. You're calling him out. Yeah, there's going to be some problems there. Zing says he made himself more biased. Yeah, exactly. Look at everything. That's what he promised. I think on page 5, page 6, that's what he promised. You look at everything. All right, so by March 15th, 2019, he said, I've gone through about half of the documents you have sent me. Half. These are documents that were sent, what? A month ago or so? We can find. They're out there somewhere, but these documents were sent about a month ago. I mean, at the very most, a month ago. All right, so let's start there. I've watched the crime scene. I watched crime scene photos yesterday. He didn't. Okay, well, I don't know. That could be a different phrase. But when he says watched, when I first read that, I thought, okay, he's talking about video. He watched a video of the crime scene photos. Right? Not, oh, I saw, I looked at everything. Now, when he says, I've watched crime scene photos yesterday, that could just be a slideshow or something. If Dan had his website then, so somebody could have went and just, looked at all of those slides of the 464 photos. Joseph has gone through about half of the documents here within a month, about a month here. That's a lot of documents to go through, right? And he still says it will take me 4 to 8 weeks more to go through this, until he's ready to even speak intelligently about the case. I've read Kenneth Main's report. I'm not really sure, even in that report, where he speaks intelligently. This is 4 months later. So he says another 4 to 8 weeks. It's really another 4 months before we get the final view of Kenneth Mains, the main report, the main event. And he just says, I'm just, once I'm done with the reports and pictures, I have to go back through it again. So he's also showing here, he didn't just look at these reports, including the medical examiner report, including the BCA lab results, which include everything. Those 30 pages, the BCA 30 pages, clearly show why there is no evidence that David Crowley is guilty. And they make it very difficult to read because you have to cross-reference things. You have to cross-reference when they say, well, item 8, the DNA in item 8 said this. Well, the DNA for this item said that. You have to cross-reference these things. That's why I try to make it simple in my book to kind of cross-reference those for you. And you can go and source it. You can go and check it out. But, if you cross-reference what I put in my book, you'll clearly see all of the items that they document that are tied to this crime scene. These BCA lab documents with the DNA, which is the biggest one. I don't know how much bigger it gets from the DNA. You have the bullets. You have the writings. Everything in those 30 pages, which did include, at one point, it did include a photo of the 3 bodies. Kenneth Mains looked at all of that. Doesn't talk about that in his final report. Doesn't say, well, look, guys, this is where the BCA documents show David did it. Look, guys, this is where the DNA evidence showed David did it. Why doesn't Kenneth Mains go there? Doesn't focus on the bullets. Doesn't focus on the latent prints. Say, look, they have David's fingerprints here. They have, they have David's blood here. They have all that. Kenneth Mains didn't even go there to back up and to say, well, this is what shows David Crowley did it. Very curious. I don't know. Very curious to me. All right, let's go a few more minutes here. He's going to look into it. Got it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So here on the 19th, the photographs of the bodies in the living room, is it authentic? If so, where did it come from? This would have come from the BCA report, that 30-page BCA report, where the image, when the BCA was given it, or when they made it, it was, it showed those bodies. It showed the 3 bodies. And that's exactly what Dan tells him. That image was contained in the following file, BCA PDF page 17. So I believe the Minnesota BCA, exactly. And he says, Kenneth Maine says, okay, gotcha. So by the 19th, he gets it. He understands where that came from. Okay, well, this is interesting. Look at what he says here. March 25th, Kenneth Maines is saying, I have read the police reports a number of times now. I will now be concentrating on the lab reports. Okay, so within 2 months, Interesting. Looking at some of these things. So Dan Hannon says he was right-handed, and then Kenneth Maine says, what's the source for that? Okay. Uh-huh. So now we're in April here. So he's finished his lab paperwork. So he's had a month to go through the BCA lab report, right? So far, he has not mentioned that he's gone through the medical examiner's documents, but maybe he has. I don't know. Pazink says if he concentrated on any other reports, he would not have concluded as he did. Yeah, I mean, that's the main. Yeah, got the same questions. He spends a month on the BCA reports and he's not seeing it? Well, he was out of the office for a cold case conference. I mean, the the irony of some of this stuff is really funny. Very funny, but sad. But he's finished his lab paperwork. His report should follow soon. So there was more research documents. So, even though we didn't really know who Dan had hired, at some point Dan did post in the Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook group that he had hired a private investigator. And if people had questions, let's go through those. That's what he was saying back then. So there were a lot of questions. A lot of people, had questions about things they would want the private investigator to focus on or to think about or to talk about or to look into. And Dan Hannon started forwarding, excuse me, in April, late April of 2019, Dan Hannon started sending some of those thoughts and those questions to Kenneth Maines. But Dan didn't just do it and just say, okay, well, he says here, once you have looked at the lab reports and, prior to finalizing everything, Dan Hanna was going to forward him the additional items of research that the team has found. This will be an important piece of the investigation. So far, I have only provided you the quote-unquote official documents, but what we've unearthed the past 4 years will be key to understanding this crime. And guess what Kenneth Maines says? Okay. Now he's just taking the check. So in early May, Dan says, I dropped the final check for $1,000 in the mail today. And Kenneth Maines just responds with, okay, thank you. Thank you for your money, sir. Now, on May 9th, Kenneth Maines asked, can you tell me more about the gun safe in question, specifically about the touchpad? It opens based on fingerprints? If so, how many people have stored prints that it recognizes? I don't know. And that's kind of like we're at there's only like 20 more days. And then Kenneth Maines is going to send Dan his final report, which is filled with some very strange things. I think at least one typo where he calls gray state gray space. And he could be just typing this out. He could be just reading this off to a stenographer who is just typing everything that he's saying, and they got it wrong. Instead of gray state, they got gray space. Because it is, gray space is only there once, right? But it's still very strange. So it just makes me think, I don't know. That's a whole other issue. That's just personal feelings, maybe. But when Kenneth Maines is talking about the gun safe and the touchpad, but there's also a key. So all somebody would need is a key to the side of it, and you can open it up. The other thing is, if somebody did take it out, why would they leave it open? When I looked at this case and looked for things that looked staged, and I wasn't saying it was staged by somebody else or by the government. I wasn't saying it was staged by David Crowley. I was looking at things that all seemed staged. And there were many things. Just in the 464 photos, there are many things I look at in those crime scene photos, things that happened in that house, documents, just based on the documents. There are a lot of things that look staged. Now, whatever your view of that is, that's on you. So, if you're not going to watch a video because it has staged, are you saying, you have a bias towards things being staged? Very strange to me. Okay, so we're going back and forth. Kenneth Maines. And they're talking about how many he recognizes. And then Dan had sent him a similar model of that, of the gun safe. There you go. So, I mean, it looks like Dan is doing most of the work for Kenneth Maines. It's not a lot here that I see that Dan hasn't done that Kenneth Maines has done. So Dan is going to give him a list of questions, the inconsistencies in the David Crowley murder case. And Kenneth Maines, on May 14th, 2019, is going to respond, "These are good. I can answer some now off the top of my head. Others I will research, but I will include these questions and answers in the report if I have an answer for them." And if he doesn't, then he's going to do what other people do and just completely ignore them. Is that what he's saying here? All right, so those are questions, but there's like 47. Okay. So here on the 14th, May 14th, Dan is saying, is there anything in particular you'd like more information on? Do you feel you have enough to complete your findings? Do you have any interest in making a trip to Minnesota? Okay, so these are the things that... okay, so he's got some... Kenneth Maines says, "You have provided me with more information that I normally get on cold cases. So thank you for that. I have enough documents. If anything at all, I would like to know more about Kamel and David's religious beliefs. I know there is some things mentioned in the police report, but if I was the original investigator, I would do a lot more in this area. Why? How would any of that prove that the DNA evidence would show David killed his wife? That he picked up a gun, killed his wife, killed his daughter, that he wrote on the wall. How would his religious beliefs help prove DNA records? How would David's or Kamel's religious beliefs help prove that David wrote Allahu Akbar on the wall in Kamel's blood? What would you need to prove that David wrote Allahu Akbar on the wall in his wife's blood? Wouldn't you want the DNA evidence? Wouldn't you want the latent prints that show that these are clearly David Crowley's fingerprints? Wouldn't you want the DNA evidence that show that David's DNA is on the wall, is on the blood, etc., etc.? Why would you just assume that David Crowley wrote that on the wall in his wife's blood? And nobody else could have. Really? Anybody else could have. And if you only found Kamel's DNA on the wall, that doesn't prove David wrote. That doesn't prove David did this. It doesn't prove David wrote Allahu Akbar in his wife's blood on that wall. Or does it? It's weird. So that's what he'd like to focus on. He says, as a consultant, I have plenty of info. As a private investigator, I would travel to Minnesota, view crime scene, and talk to people. And that's what he was saying for $12,000. Dan Hennon could have hired him to do these things, to travel, to view the crime scene, to talk to people. Those are things he specifically said to Dan Hinnon, that he could be hired for $12,000. But since he was only paid $7,000, I am just consulting and providing my opinion to you. But he made it seem in the first email, right, in one of the very first pages here, that if he was paid $12,000, then perhaps as as a private investigator, he would travel to Minnesota, view the crime scene, and talk to people. But he's just a consultant. And he said I should have my report complete by the first week of June. He does pretty good on that. About a day or two early. Now, he may have finalized the report in May, at the end of May, and then sent it off to Dan in June, but check the date on the actual report. So go see that. So on 26, Dan is asking a few more questions. All right, so I mean, it's a page 19 here. And I'll definitely see if there's any other comments, or else I'll shut this one down. So Bazing says he's a fraud. Agree. Yeah, something strange about that guy. Yeah, maybe he has a bias against the gray space. It's possible. Curious how he thinks David's blood got inside the magazine for the gun if he shot himself. Did he beat himself first? Yeah, I don't know. And that's interesting. He doesn't really go there. He doesn't, like, not seeing anything here tied to saying, look, the BCA results, guys, they show David is guilty. It's done. Believe whatever you want, but hey, these documents clearly show David did it. That's not what happened here. And it's very interesting that a guy, I don't know whether he's consulted on this or he's a private investigator or whatever. I don't know. Just some very weird answers. Look at the questions. Questions are in black. The responses are in red. So he saw, okay, oh, this is good here. Look at this one. Page 3 of the investigative report states, I saw the crime scene video. What does that mean? So he says, just the video, the pictures here. Yeah, so a video. So when he says, I saw the crime scene video, he's talking about, okay, that's good to know. Guys, and talk about the mother. I did not see this in the police report or know what mother. The mother was in the police report. And Kate Crowley, if he doesn't know who David Crowley's mother is, she's in the police report. I'm not sure what you're referring to here. Yeah. He did not see this. in the police report. Facebook post deleted. That is actually it's not in the police report, the 94 pages, but this thing here is in the BCA document, the big 484 pages, I believe. It's a big PDF that has that in there that actually shows the deleted Facebook post. I think it was on the Gray State page, but it shows that it's in the police documents, what they're talking about here. Facebook post deleted on David's page. So it says jawbone lying there, not normal, but appears to have been cut straight by a saw. And he says, I don't see it being cut straight or at all. But the jawbone is there. Yeah, I'm not. I'm with him on that about the jawbone. I don't think it's cut or anything like that. But Mason, David Crowley exchange of emails. Deadline here. I did not see the email exchange. Yeah, it probably wasn't in those. I don't think it was in those documents. Maybe. But he would have to look at the big document to see that and not be lazy. But a lot of the stuff he's saying I did not see. It's not in the police report. So but did you ask it? Look at what he asked questions on. What Kenneth Maines asked, what he followed up on and what he didn't follow up on. Right? Anything like this, he's not following up on. Really? You were a detective? You wouldn't follow up on the exchanges between Daniel August Mason and David Crowley just to clear that person and say, no, he wasn't involved. There was nothing there. You wouldn't look into that? Just to clear it, just to say, no, there's nothing there. I did not see the email exchange. Okay, maybe he didn't. But if he read the 94 pages of police reports, he would see where Danny August Mason said that he's just an actor. I don't know. This is interesting here. Danny August Mason created a new Minnesota-based company called Gray State Universe, LLC, in May of 2015. Why? I don't have the answer for this. These are just some of the things, I think some of the questions were on page 20 here, that some of the group members had, for better or for worse. Some of these questions, yeah, not a fan of. Attorney, but I think that's a great point to make about the Gray State LLC, or Kamala already killed because of remaining heirs of the estate. So he even admits here he does not know why they were killed here. That's good. Yeah. And that's the main thing is like motive. There's no motive to say, well, why did David do this? Right? But he's responding to this question. Were Kamel and Rania killed because they were the remaining quote-unquote heirs to the estate? Were all three required to be murdered to ensure the value 30 million script fell into the hands of Dan Crowley Sr. and Dan Crowley? That's a loaded question, by the way. But he just says, I do not know why they were killed. I think that's fair. There's no motive again. He said, you have to remember you hired me as a consultant, not a private investigator. Making it seem like he could have hired him for $5,000 more, you could have hired me as a private investigator. It says, I looked over the material supplied, and based off that, I gave my opinion as a consultant. I was not hired to track down leads or interview people, making it seem like it was possible that he could have been hired to track down leads or interview people. He doesn't say I'm not qualified to do that. He doesn't say you could not hire me for that because I couldn't do that. Just saying, based on his pricing model, comparing 7,000, which you can't do these things, but for 12,000, my interpretation would mean, well, okay, if he would have been paid 12,000, then he could have been hired to track down leads or interview people. He could have been hired for those things as a private investigator. That's the way that I would interpret this. So he says, therefore, some of the questions you're asking I do not have the answers to. Just some. Sorry, I'm just kind of reading through some of this because. This is what. Okay, so I'm just looking at something because let's see if there was anything before that. So on July 18th, Dan says, I'm not interested in a debate. I'm also not looking to persuade you. I'm not interested in a debate. I have put together a list of 5 points that I have. So he's making it clear, and he kind of balances all those points, and then another 12 points here. Interesting. He's very clear to say his opinion. So he says, this is Dan Hinton saying here, I've got 2 questions. Who would you recommend I hire as a private investigator to overturn every stone in this case? 2, what is your fee to hire you to overturn every stone in this case? Question 1, question 2. And Kenneth Main says, I do not know many private investigators, but I am sure there are some out there who would investigate this for you. Number 2, I am not taking any more cases currently. Go to July 22nd. All right, so Dan Hinton says, I'm attaching photographs I have run through various filters of the skull bones located on the living room. Please take a look. The areas I have circled, areas to be indentations of the skull, blunt force trauma. The skull bone is David's, per the police reports. I'm assuming I sent you several months ago. Just wanted you to receive this. He says, I did see these areas. Thanks for resending. I do not or cannot say those are indentations. Of course, I'm not a medical examiner and claim no such expertise. I did not see that addressed in the autopsy report either. So, this is an interesting one on page 23. Would the autopsy report include photos taken at the crime scene that may not have been examined by the medical examiner, or did the medical examiner see all of these pieces, and do they have notes or anything? Just because it's not in their final report doesn't mean that the medical examiners didn't look at this or report on this. But that is true. It's not in the final report. I think it was only really brought up because Catherine found it in the crime scene photos. So are you going to look at the photo and see that it's there? Or just think, well, because the medical examiner didn't talk about it, then, why? Then who cares about the photo? I don't know. So then Dan Hinnon sends him the photo. Okay, that's interesting. Let's see, page 24. Who said these are indentation marks? Well, I mean, the real question is, what does he see? What does Kenneth Demain see? Does he see indentation marks, or is he saying that they're not? So I did not see these are, I do not or cannot say those are indentations. So, yeah, I don't know. So, who said these are indentation marks? Dan Hinnon said a retired deputy coroner. And Kenneth Demain says, I would have to see his or her report. I don't see it. And Dan has no report, just another set of eyes looking into this case. Keep in mind, we've been at this for 4 years. This is... That's pretty heated for Dan Hinnon. Yeah, I think page 26 is really, that's some interesting back and forth there that people need to look at. And it looks like it ended right there. I like how Kenneth Maine says, I did not just regurgitate what law enforcement said. I agreed with their findings and thought they did a good job in their investigation. That's his opinion. That's it. He agreed with their findings and thought they did a good job. Okay. All right, I'm going to shut this one down, but I hope we can come back Sunday and continue this, because we're going to continue going through Kenneth Main's video and just move on from there. See what he has to say. But that was pretty interesting. Just kind of reading through this. It's the first time I've really read through those 26 pages. So thank you all for joining me and for staying here while I do that. And God bless you all. And I'll see y'all soon.